boxes of toys. The toys will be donated to the Durham Regional Police Service Food and Toy Drive. The food will be divided amongst the three North Durham food banks and the DRPS Food and Toy Drive. The currency will be used to purchase gift cards for the three North Durham food banks. It is important to note that this event couldn't have been possible without the commitment of their corporate sponsors. There were 7 corporate sponsors who supported the event financially, and that is Pace Credit Union, Port Perry, Andy's Towing, Uxbridge, Canadian Tire, Uxbridge, Brian's Towing, Port Perry, First Financial Center, Port Perry, and Sensational Signs, Port Perry. The community officer who organized this was Christy French, and she did an amazing job at coordinating the event. So I'll forward you the email, recording secretary, so that you have it, and I'll certainly pass this along to the media as well. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Watton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to announce that the sculpture by Jordy Lishman has been restored and reinstalled at Town Hall 1873. So it's gracing the east wall now again.
Excellent. Probably looks good in that harvest moon out there. Any other announcements from council? All right, so next time I won't skip the steps, and good agenda scheduling here. So seeing no more announcements, we'll move on to the 6:40 statutory public meeting. And as Ms. Knutson makes her way over, I will begin. This portion of the meeting has been set aside for 2 statutory public information meetings held under Section 34 of the Planning Act for zoning bylaw amendment application Z12-2016 for Harder Farms located at 23500 Highway 12 and application Z10-2016 for 916015 Ontario Inc. for a portion of the land located at 17200 Island Road. It is important that the public express their views either in person or in writing prior to decisions being made by this council. If you wish to file an appeal of council's decision on either of these files to the Ontario Municipal Board, you must first speak to the matter at this public meeting or provide a written submission before a zoning bylaw is passed. If you do not, you will not be added as a party to a hearing by the OMB unless the board determines there are reasonable grounds to do so. Public notice was served by the Township of Squilliam in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act. Diane, please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On March 11, 2015, Township staff participated in a pre-consultation meeting regarding a proposal to amend the Region of Durham official plan to sever a dwelling deemed surplus as a result of the consolidation of the subject farm parcel with a non-abutting farm. The meeting also included discussion relating to the submission of a zoning bylaw amendment application to the Township as required by the Region of Durham official plan. On June 29th, Regional Council approved Amendment Number 164 to the Regional Official Plan to permit the severance of the surplus dwelling under Regional Bylaw 36-2016. No appeals were received, and the Region's decision became final and binding on July 21st, 2016. On September 8th, 2016, a rezoning application was received from Bob Clark of Clark Consulting Service on behalf of Harder Farms, Paul and Betty Ann Harder and family. The application was deemed complete for processing on September the 30th, 2016. A planning justification report, agricultural assessment, and inventory of land holdings and environmental site screening were submitted in support of the application. The purpose of this report is to present preliminary information with respect to the application for this statutory public meeting. A future staff report will include an analysis of any public comments heard tonight, together with any written comments received, and include a recommendation on the rezoning application. Personal notice concerning this application was provided to all property owners within 400 feet of the subject lands, and a sign has been placed on the property to notify the general public of the application. The property is located at 23500 Highway 12. The entire parcel is approximately 96 acres. The applicants are proposing to sever a 1.18 acre parcel that contains an existing dwelling and a metal-clad shed. The severed parcel has frontage on Highway 12, and the retained parcel has frontage on both Highway 12 and Brock Concession Road 1. The proposed severed parcel is to be rezoned from agricultural to a rural residential exception zone to recognize the smaller lot area and lot frontage. The balance of the farm is to be rezoned to an agricultural exception zone to recognize the reduced lot area and prohibit any further residential uses and further severances. The existing dwelling is to be serviced by a new drilled well and existing wastewater system. It should be noted that should the application be approved, the coverall shed, metal bins, frame barn, and silos will all be removed from the retained farmland to conform to minimum distance separation requirements of the Ministry of Ag, Food, and Rural Affairs. Harder Farms and the Harder family are the owners of 4 farm parcels totaling 336 acres within the Township of Scugog. The applicants are proposing to sever a small lot from the farm parcel registered in the name of Betty Ann Harder. Although the parcel is immediately adjacent to the subject lands, the other 3 parcels are noted in blue on the screen. They are registered in different names for income tax purposes and therefore are considered non-abutting farms because of the different names. An application for severance was approved by the Region of Durham on October the 17th. Rezoning of the severed and retained lands will satisfy the condition of consent. The farm parcel will be retained and consolidated with the agricultural holdings of Harder Farms and the Harder family. This parcel presently contains a dwelling that is not required by the farm operation or any of its employees. Staff have performed a preliminary analysis of the planning policy considerations associated with the application that are outlined in our report. It is the opinion of staff that the proposed zoning bylaw amendment complies with the provincial policy statement, the Greenbelt Plan, and conforms to the official plans of both the township and the region. The application has been reviewed by several agencies and internal departments, and no objections or major concerns were noted. As previously mentioned, any comments received tonight, along with any written comments, will be considered by staff in the analysis of the application in a future report that will include a recommendation to council to either approve or not approve the application. Mr. Mayor, that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions council may have.
Thank you very much for that, Diane. Any questions from council? All right, seeing none. Jacqueline Mann, I don't know if you have a presentation or not, if you'd like to at least answer any questions. And
Sure, I'm here, Diane, and thank you for that very thorough review of the application. If there's any questions that are I'd be happy to try to answer.
okay. Any questions from council? Seeing none. No, thank you very much. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak to the application? If so, please proceed to the microphone and state your name and municipal address for the record. So again, is there anybody from the public who wishes to speak to this application? Seeing none, are there any further questions or questions from council? All right, well, members of council, I now call for a motion on the staff report that begins on page 12 of your agenda, and we have it moved by Councillor Somerville, second by Councillor Guido, that the report dated November 14th entitled Zoning Bylaw Amendment Application for Harder Farms, Paul and Betty Ann Harder, 23500 Highway 12, Ward 1, information report be received, and that staff report back to council with a recommendation on this application at the earliest opportunity. So any questions on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you. So that is, thank you for attending input on this particular public meeting, and that concludes that particular statutory public information meeting, and we'll move on to the second one. So Diane, could you please proceed with your presentation?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On July 19th, 2015, Council approved Official Plan Amendment Number 4 to the Scugog Official Plan to redesignate a portion of the subject lands from agricultural to shoreline to reflect the draft plan of subdivision known as the Humewood subdivision for the development of 13 residential building lots on private services. Zoning bylaw 43-15 was enacted the same day and rezoned the subject lands to include several zone categories to reflect the draft plan, recognize the existing agricultural operation, and protect the existing key natural heritage features identified on the property. During the preparation of the conditions of draft plan approval that followed, the Regional Planning Department determined it would be necessary to have a holding symbol placed on Block B, which is, there's 3 zone categories on Block B on the screen. Following a detailed review of the Stage 1 and Stage 2 archaeological assessment reports. The purpose of the holding provision on this portion of the lands is to prohibit any use or soil disturbance of the land beyond normal farm practice until such time that a Stage 3 agricultural assessment is undertaken. The purpose of this report is to present preliminary information with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment for this statutory public meeting. A future staff report will include an analysis of the comments from tonight's meeting, any subsequent written comments, and make recommendation on the rezoning application. A public meeting notice concerning this application was provided to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property, and a sign has also been placed on the property to notify the public of the application. In this instance, actually, staff hand-delivered the statutory public notices because we were running out of time. The subject lands are located on a portion of the property located at 17200 Island Road. Block B consists of approximately 15 acres and has approximately 2,300 feet of frontage on the Island Road. The land includes significant forest and significant wetland areas. Those are the key natural heritage features that have been identified. The applicant is required to rezone a portion of the lands identified as Block B in accordance with Condition 24 of the Conditions of Draft Plan Approval approved by the Region of Durham. I was trying to get this down to the next page here. There we are. This is Block B right there. Staff have performed a preliminary analysis of the planning policy considerations associated with the application and are outlined in our staff report. It is the opinion of staff that the proposed zoning bylaw amendment complies with the provincial policy statement and the Greenbelt Plan and conforms to the official plans of both the Region of Durham and the Township. The application has been reviewed by several agencies and internal departments, and no objections or concerns were noted. As previously mentioned, any comments received tonight, along with any written comments, will be considered by staff in the analysis of the application in a future report that will include a recommendation to council to either approve or not approve the application. Mr. Mayor, that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions council may have. They never say before, Mr. Mayor. They always say that they could be delayed by other agenda items, but never before.
You and I have to talk slower in the future.
You can ask, Mr. Mayor, if the applicants are here and if the members of the public are here.
Well, I just, somebody's not here, they're not able to answer that question.
No, they're not.
Why don't, we ask questions from council this time, and we just won't, move forward and pass the resolutions until after 7 o'clock.
That's fine.
Councilor Back?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and this question is for Diane. So, archaeological assessment, Stage 3, what are they looking for that it's archaeological? Is there a possible cemetery there?
No, there may be, apparently the Stage 1 and Stage 2 documents indicated that there may be a possibility of items being on the farm parcel and up towards the lake, mostly on the farm parcel. But they didn't feel a Stage 3 was necessary at this time. So if the farm parcel is sold and the new owners wish to change the use of the land or build any more structures, they would have to undertake the Stage 3 assessment at that time to determine whether or not there are actual artifacts in the ground.
Okay, so not a cemetery, but maybe significant historical...
Yes.
Thank you.
Other questions from council? Okay, is Heather Sadler here representing?
No, we're representing that.
You're representing that? Okay. So, do you have anything to add to Diane's presentation?
We just caught the end of it there, you said 7 o'clock.
Yes, okay, so, you know, so I just, because I want to be fair to the, obviously we have to follow protocol for this public meeting, is there anything you would like repeated? Would you like the presentation or anything? Are there any members of the public who walked in after the presentation had started? Okay. So what I am going to do is I'm just going to move on to the regional report right now, and I don't want to move any forward till after 7 o'clock, so we, if nobody comes in after 7, or from now till 7, then we're safe to continue on where we left off. Thanks. So, Councillor Drew?
Thank you. It was announced last week's Regional Council meeting that the triple majority has officially been met for the Regional Council composition, and the affected municipalities were instructed to make their adjustments for the 2018 election. Of course, we're not affected, but Oshawa, Whitby, and Ajax are. So, contract costs for additional electrical work to comply with the Electrical Safety Authority specifications and ongoing work at the Nonquan Water Pollution Control Plant was approved from within the approved contingency funds for the project. A road crossing agreement was approved between the region and the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nations in order to construct, maintain, and utilize a water main underneath the municipal right-of-way in order to connect the existing private communal system to a property being developed as a gas bar and drive-through restaurant near the Island Road and Mississauga Trail intersection. The following capital projects were considered high priority for the 2017 to 2026 forecast period in Scugog, and for 2017, these projects were identified. An intersection modifications at Regional Road 13 and 23, design work for the St. Field Road Bridge replacement, design and utility work for Simcoe Street, Beach Street to Reach Street, and design work for Lake Ridge Road North from north of Regional Road 5 to south of Chalk Lake Road, and property issues to address Lake Ridge Road from Chalk Lake Road to 1.5 kilometers north. The estimates for this work in Scugog is in excess of $4.5 million for 2017. Regional Council responded to AMO's What's Next Ontario discussion guide and fiscal overview and endorsed AMO's resolution supporting their work to close the fiscal gap so that all municipalities can benefit from predictable and sustainable revenue to finance the pressing infrastructure and municipal service needs faced by all municipal governments. And that's my report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, and this report has been moved by Councillor Somerville, seconded by Councillor Drew. Any questions on the regional report? Councillor Kett.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. I just wondered, is this a general approval on the island for the water?
No, it's,
or is it...
different road crossing agreement,
No.
the Mississaugas are doing the work.
Maybe I didn't word it properly. Would this be for all other work that they're going to do, or is this got to be site-specific? Every time they want to do it, they have to come back for another. Maybe Director Smith could help.
Through the chair, I believe this is specific to that particular crossing. It's a pre-existing crossing. Regardless of that, any time that water flows underneath the Region of Durham's roadway, they would require that crossing allowance.
So in the future, if they want to say service their other buildings, any other building on the reservation, they'd still have to come up and get other permits to cross.
My understanding is if it was a different crossing, they would require another crossing permit.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions on the regional report? All right, seeing none. All those in favor? Carried. Mr. Reader, did you just, I'm just clarifying, did you come in for the presentation of the public hearing on the island, on the Humewood public hearing? You did come in for that? Okay, the reason why I'm asking is because we got ahead of ourselves and we started the process. I tabled it until we made sure it was 7 o'clock in case we had some residents come in, and so we'll have to backtrack a bit so you can benefit from all the information that we've already reported on. So we're close enough now, so I'm just going to, Diane, I apologize, I'm going to get you to rehash the reports to the benefit of Mr. Reader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On July 9th, 2015, Council approved Official Plan Amendment Number 4 to the Skugog Official Plan to redesignate a portion of the subject lands from agricultural to shoreline to reflect the draft plan of subdivision, known locally as the Humewood subdivision, for the development of 13 residential building lots on private services. Zoning Bylaw 4315 was enacted the same day and rezoned the subject lands to include several zone categories to reflect the draft plan of subdivision, recognize the existing agricultural operation, and protect the existing key natural heritage features identified on the property. During the preparation of the conditions of draft plan approval that followed, the Regional Planning Department determined it would be necessary to have a holding provision or a symbol placed on Block B of the draft plan of subdivision following a detailed review of the Stage 1 and Stage 2 archaeological assessment reports. Block B is these lands right here. The purpose of the holding provision on this portion of the lands is to prohibit any use or soil disturbance of the land beyond normal farm practice until such time that a Stage 3 archaeological assessment is undertaken. The purpose of this report is to present preliminary information with respect to the zoning bylaw amendment for this statutory public meeting. A future staff report will include an analysis of the comments from tonight, any subsequent written comments, and make recommendation on the rezoning application. Public meeting notice concerning this application was provided to all property owners within 120 meters or 400 feet of the subject property, and a sign was placed on the property to notify the public of the application. As I said earlier, some of the public notices were hand-delivered by staff because we were running out of time. The subject lands are located on a portion of the property located at 17200 Island Road. Block B consists of approximately 15 acres and has approximately 2,300 feet of frontage on the Island Road. The land includes significant forest and significant wetland areas, and they are the identified key natural heritage features. The applicant is required to rezone a portion of the lands identified as Block B in accordance with condition number 24 of the conditions of draft approval of the plan of subdivision. Staff have performed a preliminary analysis of the planning policy considerations associated with the application, and they're outlined in our staff report. It is the opinion of staff that the proposed zoning bylaw amendment complies with the provincial policy statement and the Greenbelt Plan and conforms to the official plans of both the Region of Durham and the Township of Skugog. The application has been reviewed by several agencies and internal departments, and no objections or concerns were noted. As previously mentioned, any comments received tonight, along with any written comments, will be considered by staff in the analysis of the application in a future report that will include a recommendation to council to either approve or not approve the application. Mr. Mayor, that concludes my presentation.
I feel like Bill Murray off of Groundhog Day. So are there any questions from, thank you, Diane, for that reiteration. Any questions from council? I just, for the benefit of the audience that attended after your question, Councillor Back, could you just ask your question again so that we can...
I'll find it. So for the Stage 3, this is for Diane, Stage 3 assessment for the archaeological pardon me, the Stage 3 archaeological assessment, is that for cemetery, possible cemetery, or is there historical artifacts that they're concerned with? And I guess I'll add to that, what was on that property years ago that would actually, in that particular block, would have something versus the block just south of it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Back, the Stage 3 assessment, archaeological assessment, will be undertaken in the event the property is sold and there is a change of use or any additional buildings that would disturb the land more than regular, normal farm practice. And it's my understanding, through the first 2 reports, that there was no cemetery on the lands, and the use of the lands is unclear. However, when lands are this in proximity to Lake Skugog, it sometimes indicates that it could have been a settlement area way back when, whether it's native or otherwise, and they would be looking for artifacts that may be on the property.
Now, for the area for Humewood, did they do a Stage 3 in that particular area?
No, the Stage 3, the region determined that it would not be necessary until such time that the property changes the use or additional digging is done on the property. So they didn't, the Stage 1 and 2 didn't find anything on the other parts of the property, but this area of the property was questionable for artifact.
Okay, but the part where they're actually going to build and construct the subdivision, they didn't do Stage 3?
They did not do a Stage 3, but the Stage 1 and 2 on that area of the property did not turn up anything.
Didn't show any concern. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from council? All right, seeing none, and Ms. Sadler is not here, but you're representing yourselves. Are there, is there anything you'd like to add to the presentation?
I don't think so, no.
Okay. Any further questions from council? Okay, so are there any members of the public who wish to speak to this application? If so, please proceed to the microphone and state your name and municipal address for the record. Yeah. Yeah. So, sorry, I would just, for the benefit of everybody, I'd need you to go to the microphone, and Glenn, it might not be on if, it might... Yeah, so just state your name and address for the record, to please. Yeah.
My question is, through you, Mr. Mayor, to staff.
Diane, can you answer that, please?
Yes. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The zoning was passed on this property, but a holding provision or symbol was not placed on the areas in Block B that is now required by the Region of Durham under the draft conditions of approval for the plan of subdivision. So we need to add an H now to protect those lands for a change of use or anything happening on the lands that's anything outside of normal farm practice.
Does that clarify your question, or is it still,
It clarifies my question, but I don't understand why someone must have.
Comments were received from the Region of Durham at that time, Mr. Mayor. However, it was during the draft plan, the review of the draft plan conditions that this item came forward, and it was placed as a condition of draft plan approval. So the applicants are trying to satisfy this condition before moving on with the plan of subdivision.
Okay. That makes sense. Okay. Thank you. Any other members of the public who wish to speak to the application? All right. Any final questions from council? Seeing none, members of council, I now call for a motion of the Staff report that begins on page 21. And it's already moved by Councillor Drew, second by Councillor Guido, that the report dated November 14th, 2016, entitled Zoning Bylaw Amendment Application Z10, 2016, for 916015 Ontario Inc., portion of 17200 Island Road, part lots 23, 24, concession 7, Ward 3, information report be received, and that staff report back to council with a recommendation on this application at the earliest opportunity. Any questions on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thank you very much for attending and providing your input into this public information meeting. This concludes the statutory public information meeting. Thank you, Diane. So the next item we have on the agenda is 720 delegation by Lynn McDonald, who I believe is here. Hi. Yeah, please just come to the front, any one of those two seats, and just make sure you press the button on the base of the microphone so it's flush, and then you can just move the gooseneck of the microphone for you.
So we have a few people left back there.
Yes, well, it's recorded for future viewing on YouTube, so don't be deceived by the participation in the audience.
By the vastness of it all.
Well, I've obviously never done this before, but I want to say thank you for giving me 10 minutes of your time. It's very appreciated.
And I'll just clarify that it's normally 5 minutes, but if you're going on too long, we
you don't know me, do you?
Well, we are early, so
okay.
But
I'll try to keep it down.
Keep a target of 5 minutes, but we'll be this is an important issue that you're discussing, and I don't think that we will argue with that. So please proceed with your delegation, please.
Well, I just put some ideas together, and I wrote this page, and it's called Bill Richmond Lives Here. My name is Lynn McDonald. I live at 122 Perry Street in Port Perry, and my maiden name is Perry, and my brother's name is Peter Perry. So I'm meant to be here, I guess. When you drive around Ontario, you are reminded of the notoriety of various towns' inhabitants. They could be hockey players, folk singers, Aurelia Gordon Lightfoot, famous Canadian authors Aurelia Stephen Leacock, inventors, and so on. We have one of those truly iconic men in our daily presence. His name is Bill Richmond, or Father Goose, as he was dubbed by Barbara Walters. Bill lives in Purple Hill, and I do mean in Purple Hill. He lives in an underground house just off Simcoe Street and has for 30 years, his homestead being in Leslie Road. Bill is the acclaimed author of Father Goose, Come On Geese, 2 different books, the Oak Ridges Marine Photo Book, and the inspiration for the award-winning movie starring Jeff Daniels, not Jeff Bridges, and Anna Paquin, Fly Away Home. I'm hoping you all remember that film. The U.S. Wildlife Federation recognized his efforts in Washington, D.C. with a citation for saving an endangered species. Bill and his team worked tirelessly to ensure the survival towards the rejuvenation of the population of endangered whooping crane, whose population increased from a mere 15 birds to 500. Bill was a key figure in the entire team of environmentalists. David Suzuki had Bill travel the world on film for 2 alternate energy episodes of The Nature of Things. Bill Richmond has received 2 honorary PhDs. Bill Richmond is a member of the Explorers Club. He has done countless expeditions to both the North and South Poles. He is in the ranks of Edmund Hillary and Chris Hadley, also members of the Explorers Club. He is in the Odyssey of the Mind group, which also includes Walt Disney and Neil Armstrong. Bill is a Lake Scugog steward. If you know Adventure Canada, he's also the sort of the resident environmentalist who does circumnavigate various, like he would do Greenland and Newfoundland, but they just have him on board as, you know, this lovely environmentalist so he can speak to whatever their questions are. So where can you see a Bill Lishman sculpture? Most recently is iconic ultralight craft, the one used to re-migrate the birds south. They were geese in that film. It's been installed in the Museum of Nature in Ottawa, and they've just 2 weeks ago decided to leave it as a permanent installation in honor of Bill Lishman. His largest work is his 80-foot stainless steel iceberg, also at the Museum of Nature in our nation's capital. And I think this is the impetus for me sitting here, because this isn't something I would normally do. But that day, we took the train down to be at the day-long ceremony for Bill and his iceberg. And I was standing with Carmen looking at this thing, and I started to tear up, and I said, you know, after your dad passes, this is a memorial to your father. Like, he's so highly esteemed by our nation's capital, and I'm thinking, what's Port Perry doing? So, anyway, and the next one is 25 life-size athletic forms are installed at the new Bridgeport Hospital in Toronto. If you're aware of that brand new hospital, are you just off the Don Valley? The lunar landing module is at the Oklahoma Aviation Hall of Fame. Bill Lishman's massive iron horses are installed at the London, Ontario racetrack. His powerful albatross is in Ireland. And of course his walleye pike is in Hastings, Ontario. I'm of the most passionate opinion that Bill and his better half, Paula, who we will address at a later date because they are both such enormous, they just each cast their own large shadow, and I don't think to be superimposed on one another. He saves endangered species, and she works with trappers. What can I say? I'm of the opinion that the both of them really have to put Perry on the map for a great many. William Lishman is now in his mid-70s and still filled with big ideas, and I can't disclose them right now, but when I say big, they're horrendously big, his ideas, and it has to do with the Inuviat. I would love the town of Port Perry, with the help of this council, to celebrate Bill's unbelievable life with a sculpture by Bill Lishman and a plaque in Palmer Park, somewhere of your choosing. David Palmer, was it David Palmer? Well, he left. Bill's been here, he stayed. He was born, he was raised in Westney at his, on Westney Road in his homestead there. It may be a very upbeat and happy occasion to have a day and evening dedicated to him in the town hall. It could be stories. He is a raconteur of the highest order. A film, perhaps Fly Away Home. A teeny bit of a roast. He's friends with people like Moses Namer and Margaret Atwood and currently Leona Boyd, who love his sculpture and just his accomplishments. And it would be really neat because they might, you never know, come up and just say a few words for Bill. With music, of course, because I know his favorite bands. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that delegation, Lynn. And I want to just start off by saying that the Lishmans, they go way back, and they've been a part of many people's lives around here, and I mean, I remember the sculptures that Bill had done for Canada's Wonderland back in the day, and growing up, my good friend's mother worked for Paula and lived down the street, so they've definitely are world renowned. So for both of them, so at this time I'll Questions from council? Councillor Drew?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Lynn, for your presentation tonight. Were you thinking of like a bust like Daniel David Palmer?
No,
Or were you thinking of one of Bill Lishman's own sculptures?
Well, I worded it so that it would be a sculpture by Bill Lishman.
You know that there is the bridge.
Yes, I know the bridge.
Yeah,
I
that he
used to
did.
walk my dog on the bridge.
Yeah.
But like a lot of people don't know about that bridge.
It's in our public arts catalog.
Mhm.
It's recognized there, and that public arts catalog is here. It's in the School Council for the Arts. It's in the library.
It's a
and it's in the
beautiful
BIA
bridge.
office. So, but certainly, you know, both of them are icons for Scugog Township.
Yeah.
There's no question about that, and I'm sure that we can find some way to honor Bill and separately Paula at some point. Like, if you're thinking of a sculpture by Bill, he is so famous, there's no way that this township could afford to buy a sculpture done by Bill.
May I speak to that?
Yes,
Yeah,
of course.
Lynn, just make sure your button's pushed on there. I don't know if it's
It is.
there. It's okay, just go.
Bill has a wonderful selection of pieces that he's done on his property. So there might be something there that he would, you know, would be thrilled to have on display in perpetuity in town. Like, that wouldn't have to be a fresh.
Have you spoken to Bill about that?
This is a surprise.
Oh, okay, so yes.
Might not be for much longer.
It's on YouTube now.
The press. Surprise, Bill.
Yeah.
Um,
It'd be nice if he could do a big goose, but no, he does have things that, like, rather than commissioning him, because I understand he is pretty pricey, but he has things that already exist, so.
Well, that's something maybe the Public Arts Committee can talk about.
Councillor Somerville?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Lynn. That was well done.
Oh, thank
Nice
you.
presentation,
I
and
didn't sing it.
I would I recognize the fact that someone needs to be recognized while they're still walking on the face of the earth. And I think for Bill, I think this is an amazing tribute to him. And thank you for bringing this forward. I'd just like to make a motion, I don't know if I can, that we present this to staff to look into perhaps a Citizens Hall of Fame or something to that effect. And as a sculpture, look into a sculpture that Bill would either donate or make, to be placed in maybe the marketplace in front of the old mill. And I think that would be a perfect spot for it, because as you're driving down Queen Street, it would be right there, and recognizing Bill for all of his, all that he's done, and put Port Perry on the map, because he actually has put Port Perry on the map.
Yeah.
And also, I'd maybe perhaps like them to look into an evening at the town hall, so that we could maybe recognize Bill Lishman, maybe a night for Bill, that we could maybe do his flyaway home. And Bill I've been to some of Bill's question and answers, and he's amazing. He just can tell you tales after tales after tales. And I think it would be an amazing evening to have something at the town hall, because we do have the privilege of having the town hall for cost, or for no cost, 4 times of the year, and I think maybe we could look into that. So if we could get staff to look into this and promote it, I think we can make a night for Bill and make him a success in Port Perry, and say thank you for putting Port Perry on the map.
Was that a motion?
That was a motion.
So,
It was a roundabout motion.
May I just say one word?
Sure.
I'm just regarding one word. I think the Lishmans hear the word donation about 4 times a week, so honorarium or something in his name to the stewards, the Lake Scugog stewards. But I know, because I work with Paula, that donations are us, right? So maybe just if you could work it a little differently.
That's a perfect word.
I think.
Yeah.
all right. So I don't know if I've captured all of that, but between the CIO and the acting clerk, we'll just...
Something like that to get a little general.
Okay. So, something along the lines that the request by Lynn McDonald to incorporate an art piece by Bill Lishman in a public park or square, be referred to staff for consideration, and it's kind of open-ended, but I think we have the gist of all that we've talked about, but, is there something else you wanted there? I know you talked about an evening of recognition at the town hall for Bill, so maybe we'll just add that on as part of the... Okay, is there a seconder for Councillor Back? You seconding that?
Yes, I do second it. I also have
Okay.
a question
Sure.
to add to the motion. Is there not a way that we can actually dedicate an official day that we actually, Port Perry has, maybe his birthday, or maybe the day that he actually did the flight with the birds, that's the official Bill Lishman Day? And then we can every year, when you do your, what are they called, proclamations? We can acknowledge that every year from now and in the future.
When I see those V's of geese go over, that's his time of year.
So if you wanted to, or if you wanted to discuss with Bill a certain date, perhaps, but I really do think, I mean, that's something that can be easily done, and really of a citizen of that importance, not only to Scugog, but to Canada and the world. I think that's a very easy thing to do, and a proper thing to do.
Councillor Drew?
Just, I'm wondering if staff is taking all these notes and they could take it as direction as they discuss how we can move forward with this. There's lots of great ideas coming out, and rather than put it all on paper right now and create expectations, maybe we could have staff take that as direction to formulate in their recommendations.
Other councillors on it? So, there is the motion on the floor. There's not the amendment that Councillor Back has added to it, that there was, if you wanted to put that
I
amendment...
actually would like that added, please.
Oh, well, then you can put that forward as amendment.
I'll put it forth as an amendment
Yes.
to your motion, Councillor Somerville.
Unless you accept it as a friendly amendment to that.
I'll accept that as a friendly amendment. I think it's a great idea.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
that is to consider a dedicated day for Bill Lishman, roughly around the migration of geese and proclamation consideration.
Or of his choosing.
Yeah, so, and we want to make it general, to Councillor Drew's comments, I mean, this hasn't been formally voted on yet, but if this passes the way it is, we want to generalize, we don't want to set false expectations that this is set in stone. It's basically, it's requested, your request and all the discussion here will go to staff to create a report and seek more input, so just want to make sure, especially too if the press is reporting on it, that it's just a recommendation that's being resolved to look into it further and come back with something that we're going to agree on at a later date with input from Bill too, so we need to know that. So.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Keth?
Thank you, Mayor. For your information, February 12th is Bill Lishman's birthday?
No.
Hmm?
16.
Well, that's
yours.
I don't know if that's relevant or not, so that maybe Bill doesn't want to know when his date.
Well, and also the Lishmans are often away, like in the cold weather, so.
Migrating, yeah.
Defecting.
So this motion is on the floor, and it's a general motion just to make sure that it has some formality to it. So I suspect there will be consultation with other people besides staff to create a more wholesome, this is an important thing, it's not going to be just something that'll be taken lightly, so it'll take some time for sure. So are there any questions with this motion, or does anybody, council, want me to read it back here? So that the request by Lynn McDonald to incorporate an art piece by Bill Lishman in a public park or square be referred to staff for consideration and possible annual date to celebrate his accomplishments. And that's, we had add, well, yeah. Yeah, it's just generalized, but notes have been taken about town hall and proclamations, et cetera, which will be done.
So, what is the actual motion?
Yeah.
So-
Because that's not a motion.
I can speak to it. The motion is to refer this to staff. So it reads that the request by Lynn McDonald to incorporate an art piece by Bill Lishman in a public park or square be referred to staff for consideration. At this point, the motion says it's referred to staff for consideration, and then we're adding Councillor Back's addition, and that the possibility of an annual date to celebrate his accomplishments be investigated. Does that do what you're looking for?
Councillor Back, was there something?
I'm not sure if that's how I would capture that wording. It's when you actually just have an official Bill Lishman Day, declare the wording is little...
Well, I would suspect that would come back...
Wordsmithing, yep.
As part of a declaration, just because I wouldn't want to commit to something. Proclamations can be done for sure by adding it onto there, but we would discuss, I think, when the staff report comes back, make note of it on that if something's missing.
I'm just suggesting we want to wordsmith that before we get to our final minutes coming forth to the next council meeting. It just sounds a little awkward.
We can have a look at that, and we have heard the discussion today, and keeping this, I think, general is a good idea at the time, and then let staff go away and look at it and bring something back for council.
Okay, any other comments on that, or questions on that motion? So we have moved by Councillor Somerville, second by Councillor Back. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thank you very much, Lynn, for bringing this important topic to council, and we will make sure that we inform you from when this is coming back, so your information would be on the delegation form that you submitted. When you filled out to do a delegation, you put your contact info on there, did you? If not, just make sure that...
Sandra Fry.
Yeah, Sandra's right there.
Okay.
So we'll just make sure that we let you know when it's coming back to council so that you can attend if you wish, so.
Thank you, and I'll talk it over with Bill in a very globule way.
Okay.
Nothing specific.
All right,
Okay.
sure. And I think staff will want to seek that input on donations of sculptures or specific days, et cetera, so.
Yeah.
So.
I'm just uncomfortable with the word donation.
Yeah, I mean, honorarium of, we'll...
Tweak it.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next item, departmental reports, page 30 on the agenda, which is the Finance Department for the borrowing bylaw. Ms. Pick. All yours.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report and bylaw are to provide the treasurer with the authorization to borrow funds not exceeding $2 million to cover the gap between the timing of expenditure outlay or requirements and the timing of the receipt of the property taxes or other revenues. Section 407 of the Municipal Act requires the passing of this borrowing bylaw to authorize this activity. The calculation that is shown on page 31 is an estimate of the revenues that we will anticipate receiving in 2016, and the 25% of that is the allowable limit that we're that is enforced in the Municipal Act, that we're allowed to borrow up to that, just over 11 million, almost 12 million. Staff feel that 2,000 would be sufficient to cover any expenditure requirements we may have, and just for point of interest, we have not had to borrow in the past. It is just a formality, this bylaw. We've never had to borrow to meet cash flow requirements. So I'll open it to any questions.
Sure. So, and that was 2 million, right, that you were referring to, so...
Yes, 2 million, yes. What did I say?
You said 2,000, but that, we knew what you meant, so...
I really mean zero.
Yeah. So, we know it hasn't been acted on in the past, this formality there just in case. So, questions from council on this report? Seeing none. Thank you very much for that update. I don't see there being any issues with this. So, it's been moved by Councillor Somerville, seconded by Councillor Drew, and that the treasurer be authorized to borrow the funds not exceeding $2 million for 2017 operating purposes in order to meet current expenditures until such time as tax and other revenues are received, and that the related bylaw be approved by council. So it's only authorization with no anticipation to execute. Any questions on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Thanks very much, Michelle. Next item for business is various governance issues and business units, co-chairs, council appointments, committees. So, Mr. Allure, all yours.
Thank you, Your Worship, and Council, you do have, of course, before you a report prepared by myself and the clerk, Nicole Ellsbury. It's several recommendations with respect to governance. This report is intended to provide efficiencies in the way we operate and to further good principles of governance. I'm sure you've looked at the report, and I'm here to answer any questions you have with respect to it. Any areas that you'd like more detail, I'd be pleased to review that with you.
Questions from council? Councillor Guido.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not a question, but more of a clarification. In Section 3, where we list out all of the advisory committees, I believe we've missed one, and that is the Port Perry Agricultural. No, what's on there?
No, it's not on there.
The Port Perry Agricultural Society.
I don't think...
That's not one that we need to consider?
No.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Question, Councillor Drew.
That the BIA should be listed on there, or the hall board committees?
Mr. Allure.
I didn't list the BIA. Of course, the BIA is, didn't see that as a advisory committee of council or a steering committee of council. BIA being an arm's length board committee of that does have some relationship with council, but quite different from the other advisory and steering committees.
The Canada Day Committee is a staff committee, not an advisory committee or a steering committee. So that might come off. I don't know. It's up to you, Mr. CAO. It's a staff committee, so.
Yeah, I think I'd like to have a look at that. Maybe go back and have a look at how that was formed, and you know, what it's officially designated as. Although, you know, you're probably correct. It's a staff committee, but it seems to function as an advisory committee under its current mandate and composition. So I'll have a look at that.
Any other questions on this report, Councillor Somerville?
Just a question about is Canada Day Committee an advisory committee?
Yep. Canada Day Committee, I believe we have identified here under the advisory steering committee category. So I think the question's been raised by Councillor Drew as to whether it's an official advisory committee of council, and I will have to follow up and can't speak absolutely with respect to that, so I'd like to follow up on that matter.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other questions for this report? The recommended resolution has been moved by Councillor Drew, seconded by Councillor Watton. Final questions on it, Councillor Guido?
Then if we're looking into Canada Day Committee, should that be removed from the recommendation and then it can be readdressed at a later time?
Go ahead,
Perhaps, the willingness of council, we could just add to the resolution, as reviewed by the CAO, just with respect to that one item. I'd hate to take it off and it not be needed, be needed to be part of the resolution and have to be revisited. And, that, or I could take it as friendly from council.
So Councillor Drew and Councillor Watton had moved that. We accept it as a friendly,
Addition.
will you accept it as a friendly addition to just have that qualifier in the Canada Day Committee, that as per further investigation from the CAO? Yeah. Okay, questions, Councillor Kett?
Thank you, Mayor, through you. I guess my biggest question is why?
Why the report, and I'll let CAO comment that. I mean, I can at a high level comment on this, and why I support these recommendations is because we want to make sure that these, as stated in this report, that the advisory committees that are predominantly a mechanism for citizens to advise council on particular subjects, and if we have too many councillors on committees, then it may be viewed externally as not a citizens advisory committee, but it becomes an extension of council as a council advisory committee. That would be why I would support the need for just having one councillor, as well as having the contingent or the alternate councillor as referenced in there for absence. It does not mean that councillors cannot attend these meetings. It just means to not actively partake in the voting or in the discussions, because it keeps it open for dialogue for the citizens and an environment that they feel that it's truly a citizens' council or committee.
Precisely, Your Worship. I couldn't have said it any better. Thank you.
So I want to bring up the fact that myself and yourself and a number of other peoples, oh boy, there we go. I didn't write that down. We're elected on our promise of transparency and accountability. And obviously, as of the late, we've finally got committees that are submitting their minutes, that are submitting all the proper paperwork that they're supposed to put in with that. And as councillor, I was voted in to represent the people. And a number of the committees have basically advocates for certain things, and we are there to listen to the constituents and bring up their opinion. Section 224 of the Municipal Act says municipal councils have a broad range of responsibilities and workload. For this reason, councils often have a number of standing committees consisting of councillors only, or advisory committees made up of a mix of councillors and appointees from the public. It doesn't say councillor, it says councillors. That's plural. As far as any of the other things, the comments about quorum, we've been trying hard in the last 2 years to make all these public meetings, so they're all advertised and people know when they are. there is no private meetings, okay? And as far as a quorum, it wouldn't really matter how many people, how many counselors were there. If the next council in 2 years wishes to delve into challenging the municipal act, then I let them do that on their own. But I stand right now that we're treading in water that where we shouldn't be. Just today, about 6 o'clock, I got a email from a person that's upset because there can't be wouldn't be a quorum on one of the committees, and they have to be postponed to another meeting so that they don't get their sign. So, I mean, if it's a fact that people think that everybody shows up all the time, I think it's very foolish that we're, and I disagree with a lot of the things that are written on that report, so I'll leave it at that, Your Honor.
Okay, so any other questions from council? Councilor Watton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could, I'd just like to ask the CAO to just elaborate on the higher level of staff engagement. What you're really thinking there, what you're hoping, or what you're, basically what you're thinking to hoping to achieve through that. Or I know our staff is often stretched, so are we? I'll just wait for you to expand on that, please.
Yes, thank you very much. And that, as you know, and as the report details, it identifies 16 township committees, and the report also does recommend that, the nature of those committees and the numbers of those committees be looked at through the core service review. 16 committees, in my opinion and that of senior staff, is very difficult to manage for a small municipality like Scugog. And what I have in thinking about as the go forward is some continuity on these committees that overlap. For instance, right now we have administrative support, but administrative support differs from one committee to another, although one administrative person might have 2 or 3 committees, but maybe making sure that where there's like committees that interact with similar issues, that the administrative support and oversight for those committees are the same person, so we can have some continuity of some of the ideas and alignment of some of the ideas. And like, for instance, if I can elaborate a little bit further, when we're talking about the waterfront right now, we've got a committee, of course, the Phase 2 Waterfront Steering Committee. We have the Healthy Lake Scugog Steering Committee. We have the Heritage Committee looking at waterfront issues like the old mill. And sometimes the Environmental Advisory Committee is looking at that very same waterfront area. And I find from time to time that those committees don't have someone that makes sure that they're all communicating together and sharing their ideas, and they understand what each other are doing, and not working more together than apart. So that's one idea with the staffing. And then I just think, for staff technical support, 16 committees is very difficult, if not impossible, to support. That's some of the ideas I've had.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Guido.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I then perhaps be bold and make a suggestion? Councilor Watton and I are on a committee that, for tomorrow, the Youth Advisory Committee, and without Councilor Watton and I actually there, I don't think we ever really get quorum for this. Perhaps could a portion of this realignment be deferred until we do a core services review, because if we move forward with this section of the report to reduce to one counselor, which for some of us that will be a reduction in workload, so that may be a welcome thing, but then it may be reduced even further after the core service review if we're combining committees, and we'll have to go through this exercise again of understanding which counselor will be the standing member on that committee. 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 7, 8, 9, 10-ish committees that have more than one counselor, sometimes 3. But if we're looking to amalgamate some, would we not want to do that fulsome review at that point, rather than upsetting a committee perhaps twice if the core services review is due in the next year or so?
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, that's a good point, and one that I've considered, and council, may wish to do just that. But if I could just expand on, my thoughts in that area. As mentioned in the report, the number of council members participating on a committee, I believe, should be reduced to 1. And there's some reasons for that the mayor spoke about. It's a councilor advisory committee is a citizens committee and should be led by the citizens, and there should be a council member that participates and provides guidance and then brings those matters back to council through the minutes to make sure all of council is briefed with the activities of that committee. When you expand a committee composition of council beyond 1 to 2 or 3, you run the risk of the citizens feeling that they're not a citizens committee, but really a council-led committee. And that's the perception in some case, I can tell you. To delay this to the end of the core service review would amount to possibly another year. I see the core service review being kicked off in early new year with our new Director of Corporate Services clerk, and taking at least 10 to 12 months to complete. We want to complete it in 17. It's not something I think we want to complete in 18. So that it would continue under the existing framework until that time. I'm really a person that just likes to move forward and deal with the matter that I think needs to be addressed, and I feel this matter needs to be addressed. And council, on the other hand, may feel that they'd like to wait for the fulsome review. But I think there's been enough attention in this area that we should move forward. That's my recommendation. I leave that with you.
So I just want to add comment to that, and I understand what Councillor Guido was saying, is that some of the committees without the second councillor in there wouldn't have quorum, and you could just see their ultimate demise without the attendance. Now, there is reference to there that the mayor is ex officio on all the committees, and I'm just actually brainstorming about this, that to make sure that doesn't happen, I'm not going to commit myself to be in attendance to all those ones that are in jeopardy. However, I'm wondering if we could change the wording on here to say the mayor is ex officio or designate by the mayor, so that we can ensure that it has quorum. So, which means that you can still be in attendance, right? It just means that if it's not going to be in there, I know that it's going to get a little bit gray here, so maybe some clarity on when this would be formalized. Did I read when it is, to find out how much time we have to finalize this?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and I would like to speak to that also. The resolution is worded that staff would go away now, and with the mayor bring back a report before the end of January to talk about the composition of the committees and address, I guess, some of the concerns I've heard today. So that does give some time to work this out and bring it back for final consideration of council by the end of January.
Okay, so having said that, it's not going to be implemented until January 1st at the latest, that this report's going to come back. So I think that'll give time for these concerns to be put forward with with this final resolution that's gonna come forward with this, right? This is just the supporting of that in principle. So, we'll, my suggestion is that we support this and staff take it with, the comments that we've made to make sure that, we're achieving, what we set out to do by retaining these committees, and if there's satisfactory merging or there's satisfactory retention of committees that are at risk, we would look forward to making sure that we express those opinions and make a case for them. So, Councillor Somerville, did you?
Had it.
Oh.
But, seeing as how, I don't, my curiosity is how are you going to make this equitable amongst the councillors when we have some that have 8 on a committee and others that are 2 to 3 on a committee? I don't understand how you're going to equal this out when we have 6 people and there's 16 committees and everyone is equitable for this. I don't follow this at all.
Yeah, so, there was going to be in this resolution, the 5th paragraph down, and that the mayor and clerk consult individually with members of council to discern their interests as far as committee appointments and propose a slate of council appointments to committees that is in line with 1 council member per committee, principal no later than January 31st. So it'll be one-on-one consultation to find out priorities for committees so that those ones that are near and dear you retain a seat on, and other ones to...
Well, that's
much like we did in the first when we were elected.
That's
we did the
correct.
same process, and now that we know more detail of what each of the committees entails or what they're all about, I think that would be a worthwhile exercise.
Yeah, but, and this is, that you're correct, we were asked at the very beginning, but I may have an interest in 6. And so, is it a process of elimination? Like, how are we going to figure this one out? It's going to be a bit of a challenge.
We're going to try and make as many people as happy as possible.
But it's going to be
the
difficult.
Ultimate goal.
It's going to be very difficult.
So, duly noted, but I think it's necessary to undertake this as an exercise and make sure that one, it may be the flip side of it too, is that there's a tremendous amount of workload on many of the councillors by their participation here, so it might be an opportunity to kind of get some time back too and still have representation of council. So, and I'm not saying that councillors don't want to put in the time, because I can say without a doubt that council is much like the residents of the township. They put so much time and effort into it, and it really I'm proud to see how much level of involvement that there is. So I don't want this to be a negative, to be received negatively, that this is not appreciative of the time that has been put forward to date. It's more or less to make sure that we purify it into the sense that it is an advisory committee to council, and I think that if it was an item that we didn't have some concerns from some committee members that that this is something that they would want us to undertake, and these are the members of the committees. I think that it's important to re-scope these and clarify that they are committees of council and not a committee, not council, an ad hoc of council, or our councillors just making participating in something and then bringing something forward through the committee. We have this forum to do that. We can do all of that together as a collective, wholesome conversation and get the items that we need on the agenda. So I think we look to those advisory committees to give us that external citizen input with the terms of reference that they have. So that's why I think it's important to make sure that it's truly achieving what it's designed to achieve. So, Councillor Kent?
Thank you, Mayor. It's my opinion that this should be deferred until there's at least some consultation with council on this. There should be an education meeting set up, have some consultation with it. I mean, I'm trying to still figure out where the communication was to council about any of this happening. So I mean, I think that it would be a good idea to have, maybe there'd be more ideas come out in an education system, but to leave everybody in the dark really isn't the way things should happen in a municipality.
This is actually the communication form right now. This is transparency you can get. This is the comments and the resolution coming forward, so.
Okay, but like I'm saying, where's the input from anybody else there? I mean,
this is the input that you're providing right now, so.
Just saying.
Councillor Watton?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just listening to the conversation and on the heels of Councillor Guido's comments and respecting the fact that a fulsome core review will take probably until next year this time, could this portion of the core review be hastened and be separated from that? Because I agree with Councillor Guido that you know, once that is done, we may be revisiting this whole thing again. So if there is some way that it could be pulled out of the full core review and looked at as a separate entity for now, I mean, when we get to 2017, there's not much time for any of us being on these committees or anything. So, like, I don't agree with necessarily leaving it till the full core service review is done, but to me, I think it would be a good idea, having listened to all the conversation, if that portion of the review could be hastened and perhaps, you know, suggestions come from that. Prior to the January, I think we were talking about looking at this for the end of January, having some results. So if there was something that could come forward kind of in a core, like if we're talking joining some of the committees, I mean, that has to go to the committees and so on and so forth. But, you know, I'm not sure what the core service thing would do, but I think based on what I've heard, maybe if we could hasten that portion of it, it might be a good way to move this forward.
Mr. CEO, do you want to comment on that as an option, or?
Thank you, and I do appreciate that this is the more complex area of the report to address, and does need some consideration. We could look at phasing the core service review, bringing this forward early. I'm wondering if instead of a January 31st date, we changed that date and gave us some more time there and tied it to the, you know, an initial phase of the core service review. Instead of January 31st, if council wanted to set a time, it's just something I really do feel needs to be addressed, and as you mentioned, don't want to leave it to the end of the core service review. That's something that I appreciate, the sensitivity of this. We could look at it as a first phase, and perhaps maybe instead of January 31, it's April 30th as a date I'll throw out and for council to think about.
So you put it as a by that date, so it would be by April 30th. Yes. So, and then one other suggestion that might come forward with that is if there are committees where there are representation on there, where there is representation on there, there might be some out of the list that may be easier to move down to one especially if there's counselors that are willing to step back. We could start with those ones too, so that might be something that could be split off, and then the more complicated ones can be left until later with the reporting. So, Councillor Watt, did you have any more to add to that? Okay, Councillor Guido?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I may also throw out, tailing on to what Councillor Watton said, is perhaps we first look at those committees that have 3 councillors on it and start the reduction with those committees. I will readily admit that 3 councillors is heavy on some committees. I'm not sure, there's maybe 4 committees that have 3 councillors. And then I think it would be important for us to look at some of the committees we have to understand if we still need to have those types of committees. And there's a couple of committees I'm thinking of right now that I'm not sure there is a clear enough direction to continue where they are right now. So to reduce them to 1, I think would be more prudent to actually look at the committee and see if we still need that.
Any other questions? Councillor Kett?
Thank you, Mayor. There's other parts of the report, too, that are worrisome, so that's for another reason where I'd like it deferred and to go back to an educational system meeting, training, because I feel there's a number of things left out on different sections of this.
So just what are your concerns? Because if this is put forward to a motion to defer and then it gets deferred, that's that much longer before it gets dealt with, and then it's that much closer to the end of our council term, and then it doesn't act in, or doesn't invoke the necessary timelines to be able to streamline this. So I question the need to defer this motion.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you would question that, but the fact is that there's a number of things that should be revisited, and if we give you the mayor and the CAO carte blanche on the whole thing today, then it's done. And if there still has to be amendments made to it, I just think that not having council opinion on any of this is not the best way to go.
Well, this is the platform right now to give your opinion, and as you read the resolution, the reports to come back, like the terms of reference would come back. The consultation is from now until then, so it's starting the ball in motion now to come with the finalized makeup of this and the recommended slate. So at that time is when everything happens. So I don't understand what your comments were about giving carte blanche to the mayor and the CAO to do that. That's not the case. This is a resolution to get the ball rolling, so that in principle this is what we agree to, and then we come forward with that by whatever date we set, if it's April 30th or January 31st. Councillor Drew?
Thank you. There is no motion to defer, so I can speak to the idea that has been presented. The system right now is broken, and we need to do something about it. So if there is a motion to defer coming forward, I will not support it. I would support, however, Councillor Guido was saying, and I had my hand up earlier to say the same thing. Perhaps we could address the committees that have 3 on them right away, because that is clearly intimidating to our advisory committees. When we're looking for opinions from the public, to have a lot of councillors on the committee, it is intimidating to them, and I've witnessed myself that it's uncomfortable to express opinions and bring things forward in a committee that has 3 councillors on it. There was talk about, and perhaps that could be an amendment, and I would ask the mover if she would be willing to make that a friendly amendment. I'm the seconder, so I certainly do. And I would also, make the amendment, or the friendly amendment, that that date be changed to by, April the 30th.
Councillor Watton, do you, agree with those changes?
I'm not sure exactly where that first change would fall in.
I think it would have to be another, and that,
Yeah, maybe another,
I
and
don't,
that.
because it's not part of the recommendations.
Okay. Mr. CAO, can you recommend where to put that? Would that be in number 9? To reduce any committees by 3 that are at 3 now, to be reduced, immediately?
Yes, that could be added as number 9.
Okay, and then, so that would be the first amendment, and the second amendment would be, by, April the 30th. If you're in agreement.
So what you're suggesting is that by April 30th, we go down to 1 council member per committee, and that's not really what I had in mind. I had the results of the core, the core review.
Add that little bit of wording in that,
come forward then.
so just
I mean, I don't know if we want to say 1 council member. We may find once the core service review for that portion is done, that we don't want, like, that the composition will be different. So I don't want to restrict that core service review with that, with that view.
So just,
Review, all those words.
and again, I'm just pointing out that in 3, it says agree in principle. So I think if that's just the guiding principle for it, but the core services review that's been advanced as that phase determines merging of committees or the necessity for 2, then that would
I draw your attention
come forward to that.
Item 5.
Item 5, and that the mayor and clerk consult individually with members of council to discern their interests as far as committee appointments, and propose a slate of council appointments that is in line with 1 councillor per member. The committee principal no later than April 30th, as part of Phase 1 core services review, was this is maybe the language that you're referring to. It's maybe too constricting.
That's why I'm referring to that.
So I'm just, if there's another way to, in line with the 1 council member per committee.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Item number 4 says that the mayor and clerk be directed to bring back the necessary committee terms of reference, bylaw amendments to give effect to this decision no later than January 30th. Even if we change that to April, I'm just concerned that now we are, like, the terms of reference and everything, is that going to be completed as part of the core service review for these committees? Or should we just change that all to reflect that we are going to do a core service review of the committees and bring back a report for April 30th or whatever Mr. CAO date would work for him, so that will allow, all the things that we have heard to come forward without having these recommendations already on a table. That's the only concern I have.
So, Mr. CEO, did you want to comment on where you would maybe want to see this language on there that basically gives effect that the
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
that the core service review would happen and come back with that
By April 30th.
final
pending
recommendation?
results.
I'm just,
Does that work?
If we could remove number 3, and just agree in principle that there will be a core service review for the following committees, and then the mayor and clerk be directed to bring back the necessary, or bring back a report pending the review of the core service. And just leave it at that by April 30th. Does that not work?
Okay.
Make that
Counselor?
amendment.
So, that'll be the amendment.
So you're, all right.
But then I have to do that. No, just that, where it says on item 3, council agree in principle, if we just change that, council agree that there will, or direct staff, or direct the CAO to do a core service review of the advisory committees, or steering committees, whatever we want to call them, and that the mayor and clerk be direct, or I don't know if it should be the clerk, maybe the CAO, be directed to bring back a report no later than April 30th, pending the core service review, or further to that.
Councilor Guido, do you want to?
I'm sorry, it's just a question to that amendment. And would that core service review include the potential folding of 2 committees into one?
I would hope that
Perfect.
would do
Okay.
all of those things, as
Yep.
well as if the recommendation is for 1 committee member or 2 committee members.
And number 9, which was in that committees with 3 members, we're addressing that.
Immediately.
I'm fine if we address that immediately.
Yeah.
I have no issues with that one. I'm thinking of more time.
I'm giving the CO a chance to catch up with all this. So while just kind of wording that, Mr. CAO, did you want to just comment on that to make sure it flows and it's not contradictory?
Thank you. See if I can put this in some good sense here. So in item number 3 of the recommendation, I think what council's looking for is council will direct the CAO to review the advisory committee council composition as part of a phase 1 core service review to be reported to council by April 30th, 2017. Does that do what you're looking for?
It can. Did it include the review of the committee?
The advisory committee,
We've got council composition, you said, but does that review the council, as Councilor Guido said about, you know, if we look at them and find that it's not needed, or we want to encompass that as well.
okay, committee composition and total number of committees?
And mandates?
Total number of committees and mandates? And that this be completed as part of a phase 1 core service review and reported to council by April 30th, 2017.
Councilor Back?
Thank you, and just to throw a little axe into the pond here, can I ask for a direction that doesn't need to be part of this lengthy motion, but that on page 41, council inquiries and communication with staff, can I ask, request that there be some sort of, like a model prepared in software that we can get and save to our hard drive so that we have something that we can electronically form, so to speak?
And that has actually been discussed, and Manager of Communications, Lori Bowers, is looking into a software that will be software where we can flow this and...
We can call it Contact CAO.
Well, it'll be more than just...
A little app on our phone, and we hit the button and hit the app, and we have everything there. We just have to fill in the little lines. That would make everything a little bit, probably also for staff and the CAO, if it's a uniform form, so to speak, that we can just fill in electronically, that, you know, it just makes our lives and everyone's lives easier, because I don't want to be drafting emails, making my own little format.
No, it's important to have this communication program to be able to know when something's been dealt with, who's dealt with it, what's the status of it, and also a two-way communication that all the councilors are kept apprised of what's happening, as well as designating the priority and who takes care of what and et cetera. So.
And if it had something that when it comes back that it's highlighted status report or whatnot, so if your constituent's asking something and it's in the sort of the pipeline, so to speak, that you can click on to what you've sent and you can see where the status is, where it is in staff, what's the answer. That would make our lives really easier, because if we can't do drop-ins and communicate with staff, we're in the dark.
Yep, and that is going to be, we're looking at Lori to bring something forward so that it's much more efficient, because emails just aren't efficient, and then we don't know who's dealing with it, and everybody gets CC'd just to do a catch-all, but status, it's time-consuming, so that definitely is coming back to us with a recommendation, so I don't know when that is, but I think it's in the budget. Is it software for that? Okay. Councillor Drew, you had your hand up?
I was just working on an amendment with,
okay.
Councillor Lawton.
Okay.
So for 3 and...
Is your mic on?
For 3, 4, and 5, I would suggest the recommendation be that council direct the CAO to review the committees and their composition through a Phase 1 core service review, and that a report be forthcoming by April 30th, 2016, including terms of reference, bylaw amendments, and a proposed slate of council appointments to committees.
Okay. Hi, George. Okay, any questions, since that is by the two movers, so it's a friendly amendment to your own motion, so...
That's replacing number 3, 4, and 5.
So, Mr. CAO, did you have any clarification that you would like to, or is that satisfactory?
That's satisfactory, thank you very much.
And is point 9 still on this motion here? I just want to make sure...
About doing the 3.
That was dealing with committees where there's 3 or more immediately, so that we can not have that wait until April 30th, so. And that process, we would have to discuss with the members of those 4 committees, if there's any volunteers that would want to step down from those committees, then that makes it amicable, so that's where we'd start.
January 31?
So,
this one?
yeah, so we have that, I want to make sure we get this right, because, so yeah, so the number 9 is the mayor and CEO consult with committees with 3 members, be reviewed, and with a mandate to reduce those to 2. So, okay. So, any questions on that motion? All right. So we've summarized it, and you have that written down, just so we can make sure that we can always go back to the video and watch it in case... all right, so seeing no questions, all those in favor? Carried. So... we move on to the next item of business, which is replacement of flat roof Blackstock Public Works. Do we have that report by staff? Is that being, who's penned this report? Is this, by Mike Donnelly and Sean Cornish, okay? So, I mean, the report is before you with the recommendations that we approve the tender, the lowest bid tender for the base amount of $40,228. Are there any questions on that? All right. We have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Guido, seconded by Councillor Drew. All those in favor? Carried. Next item, GPNA recommendations. Moved by Councillor Somerville, seconded by Councillor Guido, that the recommendations from the regular meeting of GPNA committee minutes held Monday, November 7, 2016 be endorsed. Questions on that? Councillor Watton?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just with respect to the recommendation on page 46, where that I move that the letter read aloud by Councillor Catt regarding the broadband initiative be forwarded to the Scugog Fiber Board for response. I believe I asked that it be included in correspondence because I believe Mr. Councillor Catt only referenced a few of the items, and I wanted it, my intent was to have it included in the council correspondence and then responded to, rather than just, because I still now, at this point, we do not now know what is, what was in that content of that letter and that Mr. Councillor Catt was trying to share with us. So I would like to see it come back as part of a correspondence, as our correspondence.
Yes, I took that as that that we would be receiving that as information because Councillor Catt was who it was received through. So instead of going through it line by line, we needed to refer that, but to receive that as correspondence and then refer it. So, Councillor Catt, did you have any additional comments on that?
Yes, it was requested that I forward it, and I did.
No, I meant for the receiving for information so that we have copy in the...
I forwarded to Sandra.
Yeah, no, but I think that's the point, is putting it on here on the minutes to say that it is to reflect receive receive the correspondence for information and have copies of that for future.
Right, I just wanted to be included in a meeting under our correspondence, a copy of that.
Yeah.
I was under the impression that it was just going to be added to the minutes and go to the municipal board for clarification and answers.
Yeah. So we'll, Mr. CAO, acting clerk says no problem, that it'll...
If council would like that added to the next correspondence, we can do that.
Yeah.
That was my intent, anyway.
Surely, we can do that.
Councillor Back?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Perhaps on the two motions ago, the staff reports, the clerks for governance, that any correspondence that may come in needs to be directed to the clerk, and in order to be brought to the floor that day or that evening, has to be distributed to all councillors, because we've all had in the last month or so correspondence that one councillor had in their possession and read. Right. And I don't think that's proper protocol.
And I'm just looking at the between the CAO and the communications manager on practice that is adopted in other municipalities. If there's correspondence addressed to all of council on how that should be dealt with, obviously there's confidentiality and maybe some reports that have to be vetted by clerk to say whether this could be public or not, especially if it was involving litigation or something, then it can't be received as correspondence. But Mr. CAO, did you want to comment on a practice, or is that going to come forward as a recommendation on how we deal with information that each individual counselor may receive by their constituents or from their ward, or something that we can make sure that counselor, it's done and dealt with in a way that is transparent to all members of council?
Yes, of course, the current practice is correspondence received is put on the correspondence portion of council's agenda, and I think, if it's something that's very time sensitive or something that council need to know about in a more expeditious fashion, we could ensure that that's circulated to council. We've done that in some cases outside of the council correspondence. I think circulating all correspondence directly to council by email, other than the general correspondence method, is just adds a layer of complexity and work to the system. When a lot of the correspondence doesn't need to go that route, it can just go through the regular council correspondence. So I think that, and there may have been an example of that Councillor Back speaking to. I think by and large correspondence handled properly.
No, I don't think it's a question of the correspondence that's going through the clerk that's handled properly. It's more or less a policy that is required to be either highlighted or created for correspondence that's received that's going to be brought up at council should go through a proper channel, so that it goes through the clerk, or it goes through the CAO, and then it follows a course there. So
just on that point, correspondence does go through the clerk. The clerk's responsibility is to make an assertion of whether this is correspondence for council, and with respect to that, does consult with the CAO.
No, so I think the clarification is not the correspondence that comes through the front door, through the mailbox, etc. I mean the correspondence that comes through emails directly to council, that councillors, or information that comes through another method instead of being through to the clerk or the ordinary mail process. So I think that's maybe the reference on how councillors are expected to deal with correspondence, and I don't think, and I'm not aware of a policy, so such as the example that Councillor Ked receives a complaint from a constituent and then reads the questions here, we want to get it in a timely manner to council. So if it has an expeditious manner to go through a proper way, so that we all receive copies of that, so we don't have that issue that Councillor Watt was saying, is we don't see the questions and not able to really properly resolve on where we're directing that without knowing what's in that correspondence.
If I just could on that, those pieces of correspondence council receives should be referred to the clerk.
So that's
the protocol, and I recommend that rather than just bringing them up here. The protocol would be to refer those to the clerk for inclusion in the council agenda.
Otherwise, it risks not being dealt with properly, because if we don't know what that correspondence is, then we don't necessarily want to accept that correspondence unless it follows the proper channels. Councillor Back?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And also, if something comes forth, if it's gone through a different route under new business and has a pressing need, I still think that if there should be protocol in there that councillors need to give each councillor on their desk a copy of whatever it is that they are going to be reading, just as a heads up, a little respectful heads up, so that we're not hit with, last minute deer in the headlight news. So I think that should be somewhere in that. If we're expected to not have pop-ins and whatnot with staff, I think council should also be respected and not have last-minute surprises. I think if it's going to be spoken to on the floor, it needs to be brought on our table so that we have a chance prior to the meeting to read it, and at least have a chance in our heads to understand what's coming up in the pipes that evening. I think that's only fair.
So I would just look as giving direction to the CAO and to our manager of communications to develop a guiding document that makes sure that we're all on the same page and moving forward, that we don't have these maybe concerns. But I think that we all know what we're referring to is to make sure that we all have the equal opportunity to have the same information for when it gets brought forward to the public. Councillor Drew?
Brief, because I think you've covered it by having some sort of a guide on it, but like past practice and a good practice is that if the clerk or a letter is received here that is to the mayor and council, then it should automatically go on our agendas. But we get emails all the time about, my street light is out and, this type of thing, like for individual wards, and I get stuff as a regional councillor about a water issue or stuff. But, I think, as part of the guide, anything like that, I don't think it needs to come to council. We'll be overrun with emails on a street light or a pothole that's being brought to our attention, but something that has that should be of interest to all of council or all of Scugog, like, for instance, the internet situation, then I think, it is something that should be shared with everybody. But that would be covered in the guide that you're talking about.
Right. Councillor Back?
So I want to be clear, because I don't think my English is well understood by a lot of people in this world. So what I'm trying to say, and it's not just you, Councillor Drew, it's my daughter and other people around me. I think I speak a different language. What's coming to the floor in a council meeting. So yes, I don't need to know what's going on in Ward 2. If it's in Ward 2 specific, that's not going to come to the floor to ask for direction from staff or whatnot. What I'm asking is, if a councillor is going to bring forth correspondence to discuss in a council meeting or to bring it under new business, I'm just saying that I would ask that they respectfully put a copy in front of every councillor's chair so that we have a chance at the beginning of the meeting to read it and know what the new business is going to be, and we don't get hit. I don't need to know all the water issues in town either. I mean, that's your job, and right. But if something comes forth and it's going to be on the floor of the council meeting that evening and it's not part of the agenda that we have, it needs to have that everybody has it on their desk to look at. I think that's only makes sense to me, but I don't know. Did I speak that clearly?
Yep, I think that's the general understanding here, and I'm sure it'll come forward that way. Any other questions or comments on the GP? We're still on the GP&A minutes here. Councillor Cat?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to say that to Councillor Back's point, in the Municipal Act, it does say that one of the staff things that they have to do is to notify council immediately if any unintended or unexpected impacts for their decisions. It says immediately, so I would say that anything that's going to be handled, it should be done immediately. If it says mayor and council, rather than have it go through a system, it should be just sent out immediately.
And I think that the important part here is there has to be some sort of oversight to determine what is considered impacting a decision that's pressing. So without having that guiding document that says this is the conditions when this will be dealt with immediately or versus the next GP&A or council correspondence. So that I expect would be part of that guiding document as well. So, okay, so any other questions on the recommendations of the GP&A meeting? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next is the correspondence report moved by Councillor Somerville, seconded by Councillor Guido, to be received for information. Any questions on those two items of correspondence? All right, seeing none, well, if I'm going to just ask with this information that's being received, just looking at maybe Mr. Heritage or Mr. Allure, with 446-16, which is the Ministry of Housing, that reference this receiving is all to do with the second units, etc., and basically making it not a conditional one, but basically provincial-wide legislation for this. Do we have any, or will there be a more wholesome report on this from your department on this regulation based on if it's approved? And
yes, Mr. Mayor, there will be a more fulsome report on this. There are a couple of items in here that will require the enactment of a housekeeping bylaw to deal with a couple of the units that are not included in our bylaw right now that permit second dwelling units, specifically row dwellings. And certainly townhouses and links under this current legislation that was approved back in 2012 would permit secondary suites. So yes, a more fulsome report will come forward, as well as comments on the housing strategy that will be brought forward early next year.
Okay, and I know many of these items were brought up with the Housing Committee and suggestions, and this will just make those decisions less of a discussion. They'll just be enacted. But some of the things that I was just concerned about is the areas in our municipality where parking on the streets, and they talk about, you know, only a maximum of one parking spot per second unit could be required, and tandem parking would be permitted. But I guess the clarity I'd be looking for is areas that we have in our municipality where we already have parking overflow on the streets, and some of the narrow feeder streets that could be of concern. So especially if we have intensified areas that have second units in them, and developments that are pending that have single car garages and driveways and maybe onto a narrow street, I just was concerned. I know it's not going to circumvent the snow clearing and the bylaw of the 3-hour parking limit, but I just was concerned that about how this is going to be affecting, and I'm assuming there's going to be a report that'll come forward from the planning department.
That's correct. Yes, we'll be looking at those issues.
Okay, any other questions on this, Councillor Drew?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's mention in here, I think it's in here, but about the development charges. I don't know when our development charge bylaw comes up for review. Probably, is it every 5 years that's supposed to come up? It's been a while, so I'm sure it's going to be coming up soon. Will that be addressed, and can you amend your development charges bylaw in between? I'm not sure. It's never been done here, as far as I know.
Yep. Mr. Allure?
Thank you. Yes, you can amend the development charge bylaw in between, and just wanted to let you know that those conversations are happening at the staff level. The finance staff and myself and Mr. Heritage have been meeting, reviewing the development forecast for the next 5 or 6 years. We've also had a meeting with the Hemson Consulting in that regard. So we are looking at whether it's in our best interest to open the DC background study early or not, based on the development activity we have. And we should be able to report further on that probably in the new year. It's on the radar.
Councillor Kett?
Thank you, Mayor. Did we not do that last year from Henson?
Go ahead, Mr. CEO.
I'll let the Deputy Treasurer speak to that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the DC background study was completed in May of 2014. The last time it was finished, yeah.
Well, I guess I'm confused on the report we got. Is that the report we got a year ago? They came and presented it here.
I think that was that an update? I'm just trying to think on the DC background study. We had some report on it, but it wasn't open.
It was charges and what the planning department new charges and what they could put on developers for what part of the consulting, pre-consult, or there was a report, new charges.
So, Irregardless of that,
Could that possibly been the fees and charges review that we do on an annual
Yeah.
basis?
So...
But that doesn't have a DC component in it, so.
Either way, staff is looking into it, so it's not gonna make a difference on what we've received reports on to date, so... So any other question on those two correspondence items? Not, seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. And we are now making our way to bylaws. And we have moved by Councillor Somerville, seconded by Councillor Guido, that the bylaws number 6116 to 6316 be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed this 14th day of November 2016. The mayor and clerk are hereby directed to sign and same affix corporate seal. Any questions on those bylaws? Which include appointment of clerk, deputy chief, and borrowing funds pending receipt of taxes bylaw. Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Any business arising from notice of motion? So no notice of motion. Any notice of motions? Seeing none, new business? Seeing none, confirming bylaw. We have a 6416. Do we have a confirming bylaw? And, do we have the confirming bylaw? So, just looking over to Ms. Frey, is there a confirming bylaw that is already drafted? Confirming bylaw? 64-16, number 14, says not included. Yes. Yes, I have it here. Never mind, sorry. That moved by Council Guido, seconded by Council Somerville, bylaw number 6416 be read a first, second, and third time and finally passes 14th day of November 2016, and the mayor and clerk hereby directed to sign and same and affix the corporate seal there too. So, any questions on that? None. All those in favor? Carried. Adjournment. Did you have a question on that? Yeah. Confirming bylaw is to confirm what we've done today, and it gets wrapped up in a bylaw. Okay. So it's at the end of every council meeting that we've had.
I didn't know. I'm not used to the production of it.
That's because we usually have the clerk on this side feeding it in front of me, so it's not as big of a deal. Adjournment. Motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Guido, seconded by Councillor Somerville. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much.